the heart and soul behind every business. Stories. Welcome to Business Story of the Week, hosted by me, Joshua Laurie. From setbacks to comebacks, from tragedies to triumphs, we inspire entrepreneurs through conversations that matter. Witness the magic that turns dreams into reality. Whether it's your career, business, or life, your success is always one story away. This is Business Story of the Week.
Hi, this is. Oh, go ahead.
After the clap. Okay.
Hi, this is Sean Glaze of Great Results Team Building, and you're watching and listening to the Business Story of the Week.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the man of the hour, the man of this episode, Sean Glaze, our guest for today. And of course, I'm your host. My name is Joshua. And to every episode, we ask a question. And today's question is, how do you change a team that is underperforming to a team that is unstoppable? Well, Sean is the perfect guest to answer that question for today. Sean Glaze is a leadership speaker, team building facilitator, and author who transforms teams by fostering collaboration and improving workplace culture. Drawing on his successful basketball coaching career, where he turned underperforming teams into champions, Sean now helps organizations boost productivity and morale through engaging keynotes and custom workshops. His books, including Rapid Teamwork and the 10 Commandments of Winning Teammates and Staying Coachable, are entertaining parables that help accelerate the growth of leaders and their teams. And today, Sean is going to be sharing all of that with us. He's going to be sharing his insight, his wisdom, his experience. Sean, thank you for joining the show today. How are you doing?
Well, first, thank you for that introduction, man. I want to listen to that guy. He sounds like he knows what he's doing.
Well, that guy, fortunately, we have him today, and we're gonna have him answer so many questions. Sean, we need to
I
know.
love the question that you posed. How do you
Mhm.
turn an underperforming team into
Yes,
one that
that's
is
it.
unstoppable? I've not heard it phrased that way, but I do believe
Mhm.
that hopefully that's the gap that through my conversations with leaders and in coaching and through the events that I facilitate or speak at, that I'm helping organizations to do, and would love to share some of that with you and your audience today. Ultimately,
Yeah,
everything that's going to happen in your culture
that's
is
it.
going to be what really affects the strategy that you're seeking to implement. And as a young coach, again, you mentioned my background in basketball. That's
Mhm.
where I learned how to kind of take an organization that had a little bit of talent and hopefully maximize that talent. The problem
That's
was
it.
early on in my career, I probably had more talent than you saw in the win column because I was
Mm,
focused only on strategy. And it was
interesting.
after a particularly difficult first season as a head coach that my assistant
Mhm.
coach basically said to me, "Hey, if we're going to have a better season next year, we got to focus more on relationships." And that was something I completely neglected. And that's what
Mhm.
really kind of opened the door to be me being far less left brained and far
Mhm.
more focused upon the idea of connection and culture and all of the things that give teams an opportunity to really turn that strategy into execution.
I love it. Sean, that is very cool. I love that you get right into it right away because literally my first question was I want to lay the groundwork of your career, your journey, so to speak. What was the young Sean Glaze like? More importantly, what was the young Coach Sean, like, talk to us about your basketball coach career. Of course, I'm from the Philippines. We love basketball. We are diehard fans. So this is very interesting to me. Sean, talk to us about your early years as a basketball coach. You mentioned that you took on, you approached your team differently. Now you
Mhm.
started, and then eventually you started prioritizing relationship. What was that like? Did the wins improve? And again, like, talk to us about your basketball coaching career.
Yeah, well, every person listening and watching wants more wins, whatever that means for them, whether that's more
Mhm,
sales or more high performing team or,
mhm,
whatever more wins means for you and the people that you work with. I look back and again, you're relatively young, Josh. I just turned, I'm kind of early to mid 50s now. And so looking back, I think about that kind of 20 something year old young teacher and coach.
mhm,
And you kind of wish that you had the opportunity to pull him aside and to have one of those unbelievably meaningful conversations
wow.
to highlight and to hopefully emphasize the things that really were important that were really
Mm-hmm.
being neglected, because as a young coach, as a young teacher, and I think this is true for a number of emerging leaders, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
industry, I was so focused upon my own ego that my
Mm-hmm.
pride kept me from asking for assistance or admitting my lack of knowledge or my
Wow.
vulnerabilities. And so I'll work with organizations, and whether it's a full day or half day training, a lot of times one of the early activities deals with collaboration. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea, one of the kind of outcome kind of conversations is focused upon confidence is thinking that you can help. And again,
Right.
certainly I had some knowledge and some skills. And as a leader, every person that's listening to this podcast is able to help and assist in some way. Confidence is thinking you can help.
Mm-hmm.
Arrogance is thinking you don't need help. And I think that I was
That's right.
immensely unprepared as a leader because I did not recognize my own arrogance and my own unwillingness to be humble. And I think that humility is being willing to ask for help. And I think that you find that the most effective leaders, regardless of the amount of experience they
Mm-hmm.
have, the most effective leaders are those that are humble and really focused upon improving their awareness so they can better serve their people. And so, yeah, that's the one
Right.
thing that early on in my coaching career, my players and my teams and even my
Mm-hmm.
students in my classroom, they suffered because of my lack of leadership skills and my lack of awareness and willingness to seek out information that would have made us more successful.
Wow. That is, of course, I think any business owner, entrepreneur, leader, executive, coach, and whatnot,
Right.
they would all feel relatable. They relate to that story. I feel like all of us go through a phase where we think we know it all, especially when we've come to reach a form of success, whether it be through a basketball team coach or through your business, making a lot of sales. We're going to start to think that, we've become champions. Like, I'm doing something right, clearly. Sean, one of the greatest basketball coach to ever in history, of course, Mr. Greg Popovich, one of my favorites out there. He points out constantly in his interviews that life is more than just basketball. And this is
Mm-hmm.
something that he always teaches his teams. He's coached MVPs, the greatest players in the world to ever play the game, but he always reflects that attitude first. And
Mm-hmm.
there's more to life than basketball. And I feel that can only be achieved by having this level of relationship with the team where they can trust you and you can tell them things like that. Sean, my question now is, how does the experience of coaching a basketball team compare to turning around an underperforming corporate team? What were the principles and the lessons that you took from coaching a basketball team to now that you are teaching corporate teams?
Thank you for that. And I love the allusion to Greg Popovich, obviously unbelievably successful
Mm-hmm.
NBA coach there with San Antonio, and he's had great talent. And one of the things you find that is true, not just with basketball and athletics, but absolutely that transfers over into the corporate or any other realm, is that talent is essential, right? No matter how good a
Yes, of
coach you
course.
are, no matter what a great culture you've built, if you don't have talent, you're not going to necessarily be able to win as many games as a more
Yes,
talented team. So talent
yes.
is going to kind of set the floor for your organization. And I think that you certainly want to, in here in the States, certainly college football is about to start. We're kind of in early August, and the idea of the role of a head coach in a lot of college and even pro organizations is they're less in strategic roles, they're in
Mm-hmm.
talent acquisition. And I think that for every organization, you're in talent acquisition. But once you
Mm-hmm.
have that talent, once you understand that you have adequate talent, talent's essential, but it's never sufficient. Our job as leaders is, once we've amassed that talent, how do you help those people to not only recognize and use their strengths, but to leverage the strengths and resources and backgrounds and personalities and
Right.
experiences of others on the team, so that diversity of backgrounds and resources and skills ends up creating an opportunity in an environment where everyone can be more successful because of the information and the experience that everybody brings to that organization. And I
That's
think
it.
that one of the things you mentioned with Greg Popovich that I think that, again, I lacked as a very, very young coach was that idea of perspective. And I think that the greatest
Mm-hmm.
leaders and the best teammates often bring to their role a perspective that this is one piece of the puzzle of my life. And it's certainly an important piece, that professionally we want to serve a purpose. We want to make sure we have an impact. But there are so many other things that surround the work that we do and that team that we're on. And again, basketball background. I wish I could remember the name of the individual that shared the quote. I'm sure it's something that you could probably find. But the idea was, if you live and die with every loss, you're going to die a lot. And
Wow.
and that was something as a young coach, I was so unbelievably wrapped up in my value as a coach being defined by the wins and losses that we had early on teams that probably didn't have as much talent as I thought they should in terms of the wins and losses that I wanted to achieve, back to my pride and arrogance. And
Right.
so I think that recognizing that my job is to help to develop and to inspire and to support and to serve the people on my team, to identify what is that goal we're seeking to achieve, what is that North Star mission for us as a group,
Yes.
what are we here to achieve together, and then how do you connect people and get them to appreciate and build
That's it.
relationships so they are more collaborative in helping people through the challenges on that climb to whatever the top of that mountain is for you and your organization. And I think that there is absolutely a clear transfer of those ideas from what does it mean to be successful as a basketball team to what does it mean to be successful as a sales team or as an HR team or whatever that team is that you are leading or part of. And I think that ultimately it comes down to there are 5 areas that, and again, the book that I normally share with leaders is Rapid Teamwork, because basically, and again, all of my books, like you mentioned, are parables, but it's basically a story that carries within it that kind of takeaway lesson of there are 5 areas of culture that every leader needs to focus on if they want their strategy and their talent to be more successful.
Sean, I love that. You mentioned culture a lot, and you also mentioned collaboration and perspective a lot. And I feel like collaboration isn't possible if you're not sharing perspective or you're not making people heard. And
Mm-hmm.
you've mentioned this a lot as well when you say like you didn't have that capacity to hear out other perspectives because of course we're leaders. Sometimes we feel like we know it. Why listen to other people, right? And I feel like that's a piece right there as well, Sean, where if it starts with the leader that he is allowing himself to hear other perspectives, now people start feeling heard, like their opinions matter, their thoughts matter, and then collaboration begins to happen. Sean,
Mm-hmm.
if team dynamics were a puzzle, and I know you mentioned culture as a very, very important piece, as a crucial
Mm-hmm.
piece of how you build that culture. If team dynamics was a puzzle and culture was that missing piece, how do you think what are the things or what are the elements organizations overlook, and how can they find it in order to place that culture, like properly establish a workplace culture?
No, I think that is central to where a number of organizations have such. If talent is that floor of
Hmm.
your performance, I think that strategy obviously is a huge part, but I think
Of course.
culture is what allows that talent and strategy to really raise your ceiling of
Hmm.
possibility in terms of performance.
Hmm.
I think that ultimately culture and when I'm working with groups, whether I'm coaching a leader or whether I'm working as a speaker or facilitator, culture
Right.
is a term that I always need to define, because I think that
Right.
culture, if you were to Google it right now on your phone, culture is that one word going to bring up like 8 billion search results on Google.
Hmm.
And it's such a nebulous term that's thrown around. And I would argue that culture has nothing to do with paid time off. Culture has nothing to do with foosball tables or snacks in the break room.
Hmm.
Culture is very simply defined by me and my events and with the organizations I work with as the behaviors that are allowed and repeated in an organization. And ultimately, that
Love
has an
that.
impact on how
That's
we
it.
feel, but has an impact
Wow.
upon what that standard is that we're going
Hmm.
to meet or hopefully eventually exceed. But that idea of culture being repeated behaviors, my job as a basketball coach was to identify what are those behaviors that maybe I've not addressed that I need to. What are
Hmm.
the behaviors that we want to set as a standard so that our team is committed to achieving at this
Hmm.
level of commitment and consistency. And so as a leader, what are those behaviors that you already know in the back of your
I love
mind that you've probably overlooked and allowed that need to be
it. Mhm.
addressed? And what are the cultures that you need, or what are the behaviors that you need to define? When I work with an organization, we go through a values exercise in
Uh-huh.
defining what are your key values. Some organizations even have values on their wall, but they're not on the
Mhm.
hearts of their people and the minds of their people because they don't understand how does that value translate into my role. And it's your job as leader to put that value, that term, into the lap of your people where they recognize it not just for themselves, but what does that look like? What is the behavior that defines that in our organization, in our hallways, in our interactions? And so, if one of your core values is responsiveness, what does that mean for you with your customer? What does that mean for you with your coworkers? What does that mean in terms of that work-life balance? How are you going to help to define examples of that? And I think that oftentimes we miss out on the opportunity that culture provides us as leaders to really set our teams aside and to be extraordinary
Right.
in how that talent and strategy is executed, because we neglect to address any of those 5 areas that really end up being kind of the backbone of those behaviors that drive our team.
I love that. I love that, Sean. I love how you framed it because that was literally my next question. What are the actionable steps, right? Like, what are the small things that we could start doing in order to build that culture? And you kind of framed it generally in the sense, like, what are the repeated behaviors that we want?
Mm-hmm.
Showing up on time, respect, perhaps respecting your colleagues, and like all those little things that you try to drill in every day and make sure that it's a repeated behavior for the entire team. I think it makes so much sense why that creates culture. But Sean, you mentioned 5 frameworks just now. I
Mm-hmm.
would love to know that. What are those actionable steps? What else can we do? What is that 5 framework that we need to learn?
Well, I'll give you 2 of them. You got to read the book. No, I'm just kidding. I'll give you everything. I want to make sure I'm as valuable and providing as much information and help as I possibly can. Again, my job, I love to meet interesting people and to help them however I can. And that's something anytime a leader contacts me with an issue on their team, I want to make sure that I help them by them going away with, as you said, not
Yes.
just having an understanding of what needs to be done, but hopefully a sense of support to implement that. Because there's a huge difference between knowing and then actually being able to do and implement, create consistency and sustainability afterwards. Um, Rapid Teamwork, the book that I know I mentioned previously,
Mhm.
is really kind of the core message that I'll share with leaders specifically in terms of what does it mean to build and sustain a great culture. And I use the cheesy, simple kind of acronym GREAT for those 5 areas of culture that leaders need to focus on if they want to build a more positive and profitable workplace culture. The
Mhm.
issue is that as leaders, you're going to have areas of strength and tendencies where you're going to naturally focus on a couple of 3 of those areas. But what I
Right.
almost always find is that most leaders, even successful leaders, normally have 1 or 2 of those areas that aren't their strong suit that they need to be
Right.
more intentional about to really build a more successful team culture where their people can thrive and not have that kind of fog that people fear. Again, people don't mind detours, but they absolutely get bothered by fog. And our job as leaders is to clear away the fog with that communication
Yes.
in terms of
Clarity.
5 areas. And so the first area that I think every leader can understand is that idea of goals. You need to define for your people, why are we here? What is that
Mhm.
kind of team mission? What is it that we're here to accomplish together? And not just the mountaintop for us as a team. What is that driving purpose? And mission
Mhm.
statements are unbelievably important in clarifying some of that. But I think far more importantly, how do you then drill down so that you define values, so that you define what are those 90-day or quarterly goals, and then what is that individual role or key
Mhm.
performance area that you have? And I had a
Mhm.
great activity that I would do with my team specifically because we would have a team goal. And every year
Mhm.
we wanted to win region. We wanted to go deep into state. But for different teams with different talent, they had a different ceiling in terms of where I thought. But we're going to set the goal and we're going to try and
Right.
achieve that goal,
Uh-huh.
and then develop and grow and hopefully have people benefit from being part of the team as part of that journey.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I would do, and I love index card activities, is I would come in and have one-on-one conversations. Every great leader is going to have one-on-one conversations. That's part of the second part, which is relationships and getting to know and
Mhm.
appreciate the people that are part of your team. But for that goal activity, we wouldn't just establish what our organizational, what our team program goal was for the year and what a couple of
Right.
those things were, but individually, what are a couple of individual goals you have? And then specifically, what are the two most important things that you bring to this team? And
Wow.
what's
Interesting.
really interesting is I would do this with athletes,
Uh-huh.
20 years ago. And you're
Right.
talking about, 15, 16, 17-year-old kids. And they're, oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
I need to be a better shooter. I need to be a better rebounder, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And then you would have them rate themselves based upon what they thought their two most important contributions were on a scale of 1 to 10. How good are you? How consistent are you at contributing those two? And I had one conversation in particular, Joshua, with a little 5'4" point guard, little guy,
Okay.
tremendous kid. And
Uh-huh.
Bryson was a pleaser. He wanted to do well. He played so hard. And we came in and he's looking at his, halfway through the season stat sheet. And I say, okay, Bryson, I'd like for you to write on your index card, what are those two things you think are the most important things you're contributing to the team? And he kind of shook his head and got down. And he's looking at the stats. And so he writes down, and on the flip side writes, how well are you doing that? And based upon, your idea of performance. I was like, so okay, what do you think? He's like, well, Coach Glaze, I'm sorry. I look at the stats and I realize I've only got like 0.2 rebounds per game.
Wow.
Like,
Oh,
Josh, Bryson, do you think that that's the most important thing that you bring to the team? Well, it's something I need to do better, Coach. Well, absolutely. There are a lot of things we can do better. But as
yes.
a 5'4" point guard, rebounding is probably not your key
Exactly.
area of contribution. I'm going to be absolutely thrilled. If you get a rebound, wonderful. But I want you to take care of the ball, to limit your turnovers, and to get as many assists because you're getting us
Yes.
into our sets and into our plays and running the team because of your leadership. Rebounding is just going to be gravy for us. And I think that that's something that a lot of times, if you do a very similar activity with your team, when you have that one-on-one conversation, how do they see their role in relation to the larger goal? And I think that being team members, engagement is how much I care about the results I'm contributing to. And your job as a leader is oftentimes to connect the dots between what is that individual role of your team member, and can you help them to see them as a small, significant part of something
That's
larger
it.
that affects people and things they care about. That's going to
Beautiful.
drive engagement on your team. So goals is obviously that kind of first area.
Mhm. I love that. I love that, Sean. Of course, I love it. It points out like what are your strengths, right? Like it's not just like just because you're not delivering on this one aspect doesn't mean you don't have value in other aspects. Finding that personal individual value and how they can apply that strength into the team so they can contribute more to the workplace culture, I think is most often overlooked. We try to shoehorn people into positions, into posts that I feel like they might improve on and deliver, but we overlook what their strengths are, and we overlook actually how much it affects the team dynamic and the workplace culture as a result. Sean, these are all fantastic little advices and tips and insight. And of course, I'm very enjoying the insight and the analogy to basketball. And Sean, for our audience and listeners out there, of course, the website is greatresultsteambuilding.net. You have worked with numerous basketball teams and corporate teams as well. Sean, where else can we find you? Where can we learn more about these principles of yours? And where can we begin to start building a winning culture?
Well, thank you very much for giving them a way to get in touch with me. I do want to make sure I deliver on what I promised. So I mentioned the 5 areas of culture. I want to make sure
Right,
that
of
people don't
course.
leave upset with me for kind of just teasing that out. Goals would be the first of those kind of 5 areas. And as a
Right.
leader,
Hmm.
the key thing I would have you consider as you're listening or watching this is which of these 5 areas are you strongest at in terms of communicating and building that into your team culture, and which of the 5 areas could you be more intentional about focusing on? First, obviously,
Right.
goals. The
Goals.
second area is relationships. Again, for that word
That's
great,
it.
you have goals,
Yeah,
relationships.
we
Have you been
did talk
intentional
about
about
that.
having one-on-one conversations and building trust and getting to know and appreciate the
Mhm.
personalities of the people that you depend on? The third area is expectations. Do you set
Expectations.
standards? Have you clarified values? Do your people understand how they're going to communicate and when they're going to communicate? What does that look like for us to be consistent as a team in terms of our expectations? The
Mhm.
fourth area is going to be accountability. It is not a question of if, it's
Very
always a question
important.
of when you're going to need to have a difficult conversation. How can you, as a leader or even as a teammate, couch that improvement opportunity or the advice that you may feel like giving into a really effective conversation? What does it look like to point at a problem instead of pointing at a person and blaming? And then how do you have those accountability conversations and make those adjustments along the way? And then finally, are you thanking your people? What is the recognition program that you've put into place so people are not just
Wow.
understanding how we as a group are going to be rewarded, but what is that progress? What are those milestones that you're going to be touching on along the way to give them a sense of progress, which is a
Mhm.
huge motivator for any
It's
team?
huge. Sean, I love it. I'm very thankful, by the way, that you completed those acronyms for us because that last one, the T, I think is very crucial. Not just
Yeah.
for business, not just for basketball teams, but individually, I feel. Just being
Mm-hmm.
grateful, just being, you know, like some of my friends would ask me, like, why are you thanking the grocery guy who packed your groceries? I'm like, it takes nothing away from me. I lose
Absolutely.
nothing just thanking someone. You pass by, a custodian, you just thank them for, cleaning the floors. These are things that so small, we lose nothing thanking someone, but we actually gain more, so much more than I feel like it's the most minimum effort that we can put out there to build relationship, to build
Mm-hmm.
trust, to build connection, to build a winning culture. I love that that is your T, your last letter, Sean. I'm ecstatic. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Sean. Once again, for our audience and listeners out there, where can we find you? What is the website? Where can we connect with you?
Thank you so much for that, Joshua. Again, greatresultsteambuilding.com, greatresultsteambuilding.net. Find me on LinkedIn. Just look up Sean Glaze. I would be absolutely thrilled to have an opportunity to work with you and your team in some capacity if there is a need, whether it's as a speaker, facilitator, or coach. I am absolutely grateful for opportunities to share. And as you said, that idea of thankfulness, somebody shared with me years ago, Joshua, and it's something that you think about the importance of happiness regardless of your role or industry. That there are three
That's it.
things that contribute to your happiness. One is gratefulness,
Yes.
the other is growth, and the last
Grow.
is going to be giving. And I think that
Oh,
this has given me, anytime I can give, anytime I feel like I'm
beautiful.
able to grow myself or someone, and then to take a moment to be appreciative for, those are opportunities. Again, very much enjoyed and happy about the opportunity to share with you and your audience, and wish you absolutely all the best.
Sean, the pleasure is mine, and I am quite grateful as well for all that insight. Thank you so much to all our audience and listeners out there. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Thank you for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed Sean being our guest as well. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you on the next one. Bye bye.
All right, so here's the thing. We try to get a little bit better every day, but we can't do it without you. So if you like the video, make sure to like and subscribe below. And if you have any comments, just leave them in the space under.